All right, what do you think of the Reform Party?
Again, there's some aspects of the Reform Party I would certainly I would fall on the side of their views on certain things, but I don't really think they're a party of serious substance. I don't think.
What is a policy, just general policy, that you think is a good approach from Trump?
I think we absolutely, not just America. I think we absolutely have to get a grip on immigration. The Germans are taking Russian oil and are over reliant on Russian energy. You know, France could have done more. Great Britain could have done more. We all could have done more, but we didn't do it. And at what point do you say no? And there has to be a moment in which you say no. And I just feel that flying to Alaska and putting on that big show was distasteful. It was distasteful for us.
Barry Funston, we still have a roof being constructed over our heads, but nonetheless, we're going to crack on and continue our interview from the first part. I do want to say this for anybody that's tuning in. If you haven't seen the first part of the interview, please stop, go back, and watch the first part of Barry's interview. Not only does he walk through growing up in Belfast at a really interesting time that carries you through the troubles, understanding the political dynamic of Northern Ireland at that time, but we also walk through this tremendous career that you had in the oil business. Nearly 3 decades. You had started off with a family oil company that had 14 employees. And by the time you left, they had been purchased by a publicly traded company. You guys went on a series of acquisitions and close to 600 plus employees on a trajectory to be 1,000 plus. So after the publicly traded company takes over, the culture changes, the values change, and I think you were done.
Yeah, my race was wrong.
So you're on to something new.
Yeah.
So about a year, you sit out on the sidelines, figuring out what's next for Barry, and then enter Rory McIlroy. Can you explain this crazy turn of events?
Yeah, it was mad. So I knew the McIlroy family. I was in their orbit, so it wasn't unusual for me to meet with Rory, chat with Rory, and I had been on a year out, as you said, and I was in the United States of America, as I am today. I have a great affection for this country, and I visit as often as I can. So I was actually in Las Vegas, bizarrely, now that I think about it, and the Ryder Cup was coming up in Chicago, the famous Miracle in Medina, and Rory had asked if I would like to come to the Ryder Cup in Europe in America. So I flew off to Chicago, went to the Ryder Cup, and that Ryder Cup coincided with Rory signing a deal with Nike, and that was a dream come true for him. It was a lucrative deal. He realized he had a lot of money, and he said he wanted to give back, and he asked me would I look at options around what he could do philanthropically. So I said, yeah, I'll research it for you. It wasn't something that I had any clue about, but I got into it, and it became clear to me very quickly that what he needed to do was he needed to set up his own charitable foundation. It was the only way he was going to be able to control where his money was going, and we can make a real impact. So, that was around Christmas time. I presented that to his management team. It was obvious to me that the management team were not going to allow this to run, because I was very determined that it had to sit apart from his management company, and it had to have employees in its own right. It was clear to me that was an avenue to him that they weren't going to agree to, because they wanted to control their asset. So I told him that I presented to the management team, this is what you need to do, but it's not good. It won't be a runner. And he said, well, don't you worry about that. Just thank you for doing it. And so that was around about Christmas time. Then we fast forwarded to April. He asked me to join him at a golf tournament in London. And it was whilst traveling to that golf tournament, he asked would I run his charitable foundation. And this coincided with a falling out he was having with his management company at the time. So he had decided that he was going to set up his own management company, and he asked would I sit on the board of that management company as well. So I was the secretary of his business, but it was also then I set up, constructed under his vision, but set up this new charity called the Rory Foundation, and I was the chief executive of the Rory Foundation. That's what I fell into from oil.
All right. So just to backtrack, if people were living under a rock and you don't know who Rory McIlroy is, child prodigy, golf prospect, a local kid out of Northern Ireland. Yeah. My understanding is you knew the family.
Yes, that's correct.
You know, having grown up there, you probably aware of a sports child prodigy like Rory. And he was as advertised. I mean, incredible person, incredible golfer, and starting to get some notoriety. And he's in this big management contract with whoever. And he's got a vision of where he wants to take his career, and they're not on board with that vision. So decisions are made, and he restructures into a new management company, which was largely a small group of people that were really close and trusted confidants and friends of Rory, including you. And so now you're on the board, but the chief executive propping up and starting, this charitable initiative that, he had kind of visioned maybe a year or years prior to that event.
That's pretty much it. And interestingly, it was a crazy run, but interestingly, one of the first ports of call on the journey of learning was I was sent here to Las Vegas because Andre Agassi, at the time, was running his charitable foundation, and apparently Andre was kind of the exemplar of a sportsman who had his own charity, and he was very gracious, and I came to his offices, and I was given some fabulous advice by his people.
Andre Agassi's a name. I mean, I was born and raised in Las Vegas. I got a lot of love for my hometown. Andre Agassi's a name that you grew up hearing. Obviously a huge tennis star and kind of a heartthrob when he had his long hair and, he's ripping his shirt off and all that. All the girls are getting crazy. But he did a lot for town. I mean, particularly the Boys and Girls Club. Andre Agassi was heavily involved in youth sports and just an incredible ambassador, not only for the sport of tennis, but I think for the city of Las Vegas. So probably no better connection to make considering you were asked to do something you had no experience with.
None.
Nonetheless, right, and I think this draws a parallel to my own career. I had no experience in the oil industry. You still have a skill set that you can horizontally apply to something new. And you had been put in positions that were similar and unique when, hey, prop up this lubricant division. Hey, run this rebrand. You're going to take on the most important sales role of the company. Now you're going to build out our commercial division. So you had been asked time and time again to do something that was new and unfamiliar and that was a big initiative. So similarly, you get asked to do something new. It just happens to be in the philanthropic and nonprofit and sports world. So now you're on this new journey with Rory McIlroy and a really small group of people that are decision makers, not some giant management company, making big swooping decisions that you're not included in. You're right there in the mix and getting things started and getting some advice from a hometown guy like Andre Agassi.
Yeah, and that was, as I say, some of the best advice I got was from his team. And yeah, we were a very tight unit. Rory didn't want a large organization around him, so we were a tight unit. So it was exciting. It was a real pioneering time. It was great fun.
So in the first couple years, which was around the time that you and I got introduced to each other, what was first for you guys? Was it the Irish Open? Was it trying to choose the direction of giving back? I mean, how did all that evolve?
Well, I suppose initially what went on was there was a lot of back and forward to try to flesh out what Rory wanted to do with his charity, and you're not talking to him every day, right? So
he's out winning majors,
winning golf tournaments, and that's primarily what he is, a golfer. So we had to construct the charity. We had to make sure we had all the governance and compliance in place. We had to make sure that we couldn't unilaterally make a decision to donate a lot of money to somebody if he didn't approve of it. So there was a lot going on, to get the construct right in the first sort of 6 months, 6 to 8 months. And then we were getting a little head of steam, but we realized, I think, he wanted to kind of put our heads above the parapet. So we kind of fell upon this idea that using the Irish Open as a shop window for what his charity did was a good idea. At the time, the Irish Open, as we said earlier, was not in a good place. We couldn't. It wasn't a sponsor of the event. The marquee players were not attending the event. It kind of was on a downward spiral. So we cobbled together this idea with the European Tour, who own the Irish Open, that we would host it. Initially, Rory wanted to buy it, and it would be our tournament, but the European Tour were not keen to sell it. So we came up with this idea that we would host the Irish Open, and it would become the shop window for his charitable organisation. So the week of the tournament, we would be inviting guests to the Irish Open. We would be talking about what the charity did. We would identify organisations that fell into the remit of what we wanted to do as a charity in the area in which the Irish Open was being played, so that we were bringing a positive impact to the area that the golf tournament was being played. So when the golf tournament left, there was a legacy that remained. So that's where you and I got to meet.
Yeah, not just memories and trash that are left over, but a real legacy of giving back and
Yeah.
whatever charitable contribution you guys decided that year. And just to rewind a little bit, at the time, Irish Open is kind of a failing tournament.
Yeah.
And on the verge of being dropped by the European Tour, just not a lot of momentum behind it, financially not very successful. And you guys decide that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm a hometown kid. We're going to prop up the Irish Open, and we're going to loop in this charitable involvement into this big week-long initiative, so that when the tournament is done and the trash is cleaned up and the memories are had, something is left behind positively for the community.
Yeah, for sure.
So what was that? What did that look like in the first year?
It was pretty crazy. So the narrative in the first year was perfect, because the first year we were involved with the Irish Open. It was being hosted at Royal County Down, which is one of the greatest golf courses in the world. County Down is the county in which Rory was born, and at that time we were supporting a children's cancer charity, and they had just built a respite centre in the foothills of the Mourne Mountains in County Down. So the narrative was great. So all Rory had to do was get a few marquee guys to come and play in the tournament.
Some talent to help market it.
And then we got to work on finding a commercial sponsor, because the tournament didn't have a commercial sponsor. So the combination of where it was being played, the fact that Rory was able to get the likes of Ricky Fowler to come, which was a great coup for us. Sergio Garcia came along. That really lifted the tournament.
Yeah.
So we were able to learn on the hoof, I think, and the first year was frantic, and there was a lot of learnings to be had from it. But I think the debrief, was useful. We learned a lot, and then we were able to develop the tournament and properly position it.
Yep.
So we had to change the date of the tournament. We didn't have a great date, so we got the date flipped with the French Open, which was useful for us because it brought us in just pretty much before the Open. So we then packaged the idea of the Irish Open, the Scottish Open, and then the Open as kind of a links swing. They were all played on links golf courses, and that grew real momentum. Rolex got behind it, but they loved this concept, and it became one of the most successful tournaments on the European Tour.
Yep. And that's actually where our friendship started as a business relationship. So I was involved, not in the Ryder Cup that you had mentioned earlier, but I believe the following Ryder Cup, because it flips back and forth between America and Europe. We were in Scotland at Glen Eagles, and we were involved with a Ryder Cup activation, totally unrelated to Rory, but we had some assets in play that I think were helpful or beneficial to Rory's family and team. So we became acquainted with each other, and I think they got to see some of our core competencies in play, and they were telling us about this kind of evolving initiative, and we maintained communication after that, and it turned out that we think that we can add value to each other. Also, considering you guys were targeting the American market for philanthropy initiatives, so then we get involved in this kind of 4-year chapter of the Irish Open. I was not at Royal County Downs. I was one of the guys back in the office, peeling carrots, doing my fair share there. but eventually got to come out to the Irish Open and spend time for a few years. So when we get into 2017 and 2018, we'll definitely discuss some shenanigans. But can you talk about how politics even entered into the Irish Open? Because my understanding is it had to flip between North and South every other year to make sure that you were appeasing people in both parts of the country or both countries.
We rotated, so we would have the Irish Open in Northern Ireland, then it would go south, and then we'd back to Northern Ireland, and that was and I think that was as much a desire to enable as many people on the island to have access to the tournament as it was anything overtly political. I think that it was more to do with just the exposure of the event. So it was interesting. I had a great lunch with your president during that journey.
Donald Trump, 45, 47.
Donald Trump. He wanted the Irish Open at Doonbeg, which is one of his, and in fact, it's going there next year. He finally got it, and we had a lunch to discuss hosting the Irish Open at Doonbeg, which was an interesting conversation.
Let's generally expand on that conversation. We don't need to get into pillow talk as much as generally what was Trump trying to accomplish by bringing it there? Why didn't it end up there?
Well,
until now it's going there.
I think he identified, to be fair to him, I think he identified it as a real force for good, and he felt that it would be useful to host it at his golf club. But it was interesting in the sense that he never made me an offer.
An official offer. Just basically, I'm interested in willing, but no details on the fact.
Detail.
Yeah, got it.
I remember saying, he said, I run the greatest golf tournaments in the world. We were in Doral at the time in Miami, and his golf tournament was on. And I sort of said, well, I think the RNAA may question that, Mr. Trump, but and we left. We had a great meeting. We left, and 3 weeks later, I got a telephone call from his golf guy, who said, have you considered Mr. Trump's offer? And I was like, he hasn't made an offer. We're absolutely open to the possibility, but what is the offer? I mean, do you want paid by us, or are you paying us? What is the offer?
What are the details?
And then 2 weeks later, I got another call to say Mr. Trump's taking the offer off the table.
Offer rescinded.
Offer rescinded.
I think that's in par with his negotiation style, and also with his marketing approach. Like he will exaggerate, either from a negotiating standpoint or from a marketing standpoint, quite often, right? It's part of his allure or his style, is that if he holds a golf tournament, it is the greatest golf tournament in the world. Mm-hmm. According to him, it's his opinion, right? If I were to ask you, what's the greatest country in the world? What would you say?
What would I say? I would say Great Britain.
And I would have a different opinion, right? Doesn't mean that you're right or you're wrong. That's just your opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say America, greatest country in the world, hands down. We learned a lot from you guys. Took a lot from your Magna Carta, but that's my opinion. So moving on from that topic, it doesn't end up at Trump's golf course.
It does not.
It sounds like he's been working on it.
Yeah, well, he's getting it, which is great. I'm delighted. And I'm still in touch with his golf guy, and I sent him a congratulatory message.
Good.
Yeah. No, it's good that he's getting it. And
maybe we'll get the band back together and go to it.
We may do.
Well.
And the great thing about it, I think, was, from our perspective, the fact that I was sitting, having a conversation with Donald, who does have some fabulous golf properties around the world. I mean, he knows...
Beautiful real estate, yeah.
Incredible. So that was an indicator of just how we had progressed the tournament.
Yeah, impactful.
Yeah.
And to your point that you made previously, it went from a financially struggling tournament that was going to be dropped by the European Tour to being added to the Rolex Series.
Yeah.
Can you explain the difference in prize purse? For the golfers that are interested in coming out to the Irish Open, what it used to be when it was getting ready to drop, and then what happened after the fact of it joining the Rolex Series?
Well, the total prize fund before we got involved would have been sub $1 million total prize fund.
For all golfers involved in the entire tournament, collective purse.
Collective purse would have been sub $1 million. And when we finished our association with the tournament, it was a $6 million tournament. So that was 4 years. We had managed to lift the bar.
So a 6x increase.
Yeah.
And when you guys were rebuilding the Irish Open, the talent was largely coming because it was within Rory's network, and they were willing to come out because Rory asked them. Large,
First year, absolutely.
but by it growing the way it did because of your guys' involvement, and you get a prize purse like that, the talent comes.
The talent comes, yeah. Build it and they will come. And also the positioning of the tournament just before the Open. So a lot of Americans are going to be in Europe anyway. They're going to be practicing on links golf courses.
Yep.
So that was attractive because they're getting tournament play on a links golf course close to the Open. So that was getting the dates flipped was a really positive, strong strategic decision. We also, I think, and it's in no short measure to you guys, we put on a good show, right? You know, the European Tour, before we got involved in the European Tour, for example, you know, they wouldn't have had music at a golf tournament.
Yeah.
You know, we started to have concerts before the events. You know, we put bars on the golf course.
Beer gardens. Yeah.
You know, we did a lot of cool stuff, and a lot of guys who came realized this is a good week. This is a good week to be here. So it really lifted the stature of the tournament.
Not only that, one of the things that I think got brushed under the rug is the effort that everybody went through to drive tourism to Northern Ireland and Ireland. And you go back and you look at, some of the photos, and we'll include some of those photos in the B-roll for these videos, but you've got stormtroopers running around a golf tournament, or you've got, Game of Thrones kind of esque involvement in there and tours happening subsequent around the tournament. And really what you're highlighting is like, there's been this massive push into Northern Ireland with the movie industries. Game of Thrones was a big drawing. Yeah. Star Wars, portions of it were shot there. So you were integrating these different elements to try to drive tourism. So it's not just that it was the charitable involvement and the rebirth of the Open and how that played, or the Irish Open, how that plays within the Open, but you were highlighting all these amazing parts of the country, or both countries really, to get, if it's Americans and other international audience, to come to Ireland and drive tourism. Sure. So I think there were many initiatives that were wildly successful in that 4-year period of time that we were involved in.
Yeah, we did. I mean, one of the things I was very clear on around, to your point, was that it was very Irish centric. So, in the first year we had Van Morrison sing for us. I mean,
yeah,
we in the pro-ams we would have made sure that we had notable Irish celebrities playing. So we had Jamie Dornan came and played in the Irish Open. We made sure that the best of the country was being put on display. It wasn't simply a golf tournament that came to a destination. We integrated the destination into the event, and I'm very proud of what we achieved there, because I look at some golf tournaments now that the European Tour host, and they've taken on a lot of what we had driven during our time.
Best practices,
yeah, and it works. It absolutely works, and it's wonderful that when the circus leaves the town, all the good things that came from it remain, and I get videos from people that we have helped to this day. I had a guy telling me he visited a facility in Kildare that we helped a few weeks ago, and he had brought me a photograph of a little plaque, and it's lovely to hear those things.
I agree. To this day, I will still try to find a way to get back to the Harbor Bar in Port Stewart, because of the time that we spent there during the Irish Open, and because there's a madman behind the bar that everybody should experience.
Crazy man.
Yeah.
Willie. That was a lively spot.
That's a perfect segue. So let's jump into 2017, 2018, I believe the last 2 years that we were involved in the Irish Open. And let's just jump through memory lane. So 2017, if I remember correctly, that's Port Stewart and Bushmills Inn.
Port Stewart and the Bushmills Inn, yeah.
So we went out there to go out and prospect everything before the tournament carried on. And do you remember our evening at the Bushmills Inn and your wooden chair?
I do. The talk to me. I love a wooden chair.
Well, tell us about that.
I've always had going back to my oil days, there was a guy that used to sit in this wooden chair behind his desk, and he had attached wheels to it. He was so fond of this wooden chair, but he had attached wheels to it because he needed to scuttle across the office, and this chair allowed this to happen. But I just love I love the texture of wood. I love how the chair groans when you sit in it. It creaks, it moves. There's something there's something that I really, really love about a wooden chair, and I found a super wooden chair at the Bushmills Inn.
You wouldn't leave it. Yeah, I'd like to summarize it. The chair had some character.
Chair had character. It
And
had stories to tell.
it had stories to tell, and we were at the bar late into the evening. I'm not a drinker. You guys love your Guinness, although I did have a double O Guinness last time I was in town. I'm happy to do that
indeed.
again. It was great. As the Guinness is flowing, you're settling into your wooden chair and telling these stories about the character of the chair and the secrets that it was telling. It was probably one of the funniest moments until later that evening because James was also drinking.
Yeah.
James was my counterpart. He was
Your
my road
colleague,
dog.
he got locked in a cupboard, I think.
He got locked in a closet.
Yeah.
And I had to help him come out of the closet. I'd like to say figuratively, but literally, I had to help him out of the closet because he had so many drinks that night. He got up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, but didn't turn any lights on, and he ended up in a closet and couldn't find his way out. So I had to help escort him out of the closet so that he could find the facilities and go to the restroom.
Yeah, but we didn't hold that against you. We stuck with you, and
Still got up early the next morning and did the job.
You guys did an incredible job for us. There's no doubt about it. We simply could not have done it without you. It was interesting. You mentioned briefly earlier. We hosted a lot of American guests, and the first year, the attention to detail you guys provided was phenomenal. And I remember the first year, I was completely losing it around the number of lavatory signs were being required to point people in the direction of the lavatory, and the cocktail lists that had to be produced.
Yeah.
And I was just, this is ridiculous. We don't need all this. And boy, was I wrong. When those guests went on tour, they were very needy. They needed to be shown every...
It's cattle herding.
Yeah.
And you need to hit them over the head with where to go, what to do, what optionality they have, so that everybody stays within the cattle guards.
Yeah, but these folk donated a lot of money to Rory's charity to be part of this and to be on the inside, as it were, and they needed to be looked after, and you guys certainly looked after them.
Yeah, and for me, when we were working in that environment, because you're dealing with ultra high net worth individuals that are dumping a lot of money and they have high expectations. So it's easy to get desensitized to that and say they're just a rich jerk. But if that's because you lose sight of the why you're doing it, right? So for us, it was always, yeah, you have to appease this ultra high net worth individual with these crazy expectations, but don't get lost in that. The purpose of why you're doing it is because this person is donating a lot of money for this experience. Where is that money going? What is it doing? What is the purpose behind everything that we're doing? So if someone's rude to you in the moment, whatever, just let it roll off your back. It's no big deal. Like that's not the focus here. It's not that you were wrong. Like get your ego out of it. We're here for a purpose. Focus on the purpose. And it's all good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it was.
Well, you knocked it out of the park. They were special times.
So can we walk through the last Irish Open? Because that was a special one, at least to me. My wife came out.
Yeah.
My sister-in-law came out. Even a couple friends. Like there's a young man that I know him through. I married into this family. His older brother married into this family. He was, I believe, just graduating law school. So he's trying to figure out what he was doing with his life. And he may have started to practice law in sports. So I said, hey, if you want to get a peek behind the scenes, we need a couple extra interns to come out here and help us, manage reception area, whatever, hand out tickets for the Irish Open. So he got to come out. So there was some personal relationships that were involved in that last Irish Open that didn't pre-exist that. It was all work before that. Nobody was invited. And we had a unique hotel. Can you walk through the last year? Like if you're an ultra high net worth individual and you're going to come out and be involved in the Irish Open for the Rory Foundation, what did that full experience look like from, the client's perspective? And then we can dive into some of the shenanigans that took place behind the scenes. But if you're that rich guy coming out from Chicago who wants to make a $250,000 donation, what do you get out of it when you joined the Irish Open for that last year?
Yeah, so basically, from the moment you arrive in Ireland, you're looked after. So you're collected from the airport. We've selected some properties that we think would be befitting the stature of the individuals that come. The last year was tricky because we were in a pretty remote part of Donegal. Ballyliffin.
Yeah.
And you spend the week being entertained and hosted by Rory and his team. So we would put on cool events. On the run up to the tournament, during the tournament, you would have access to our hospitality suite, which would sit on the 18th green, which is a pretty spectacular,
Beautiful hospitality
location.
suite.
Yeah,
Past trophies represented of winners or Rory's trophies, very branded. You understood the cause. The cause was front and center when you were in that hospitality, and you're rubbing shoulders with some of the best talent in the tour and some of the decision makers in the tour.
Yeah. So it was a pretty special. It would have been a pretty special week. But I think the most fun, from my perspective, was when we were able to decompress as a team.
Yeah.
Because for me, and I think that your company is an exemplar of this ethos. We are a team, and I wanted us all to be on that journey together. And I happened to be the guy that had to kind of try to, I suppose, herd many of the sheep. But it was, we couldn't simply have done it without everyone. And it was lovely to be able to sit in the evening and to decompress with you guys. I mean, they were because it was frantic from the moment you stepped out of your room in the morning until the moment you,
Oh, yeah.
The final putt fell, you were on.
It was a high pace. It wasn't just a golf tournament that you were involved in. We had so many ancillary events going on, whether it was looking after the guests if they just wanted to do simple tourism, or there was the evening with Rory.
Yeah.
That was a huge event. Totally, related to the Irish Open, but totally separate from it. Can you walk through one of the evening with Rory and kind of what went into that? How many people showed up for that? Yeah, and that was amazing.
Yeah. Again, it would have depended on the location, but the one I suppose that I remember vividly, because we had a terribly long car journey back to the Bushmills.
We'll get into that.
Was we had an evening in a theatre in Belfast where Rory was in conversation with Pep Guardiola, the Manchester City manager. The year before that, we had Sir Alex Ferguson in Dublin, and we would have an evening, in a theatre that's holding 3,500, 4,000 people. And that was a pretty special thing. We were able to sell tickets for that, which helped the charity, but we also would host our high nets who had donated quite a lot of money, and they would get to experience this up close and personal conversation. So that was a wonderful event.
Similar to what we're doing now, just with an audience of 4,000 people in a beautiful venue. And I remember that venue too. And you had a moderator, right?
Yeah, we had a moderator who was a pretty famous actor back home, a guy called James Nesbitt, who was a wonderful supporter of the charity, but liked to throw himself into the event very enthusiastically.
Jimmy Nesbitt is a wild man. I love him personally, but one of my tasks that year was to make sure that I received the talent, back of house, got him set up in the green room, and looked after him and gave him call notices, right? Yeah. So I remember Jimmy Nesbitt, who, he's an actor. He's very involved in media. Like he knows what he's doing, but I was told specifically that you got to give him call notices. So, hey, 20 minutes out, 10 minutes out, 5 minutes out, knock on the door, enter the door, make sure he's aware. And I did that. And every single time I went in the door, he had some choice words for me. I don't know if he would even remember my face or name if he saw me, but he was not happy to see me enter his green room. But I was asked to do it. It was part of the job. Sometimes my job was to make sure that people stayed on track and on time. And it was a little annoying. I did it with a smile on my face, but he's like, I have done this before. You know that, right? I'm like, I know. 5 minutes out.
You told me that story after the event, which I just thought was
fantastic. And he's just chain smoking in there, going over his questions.
But the fascinating thing about Jimmy is that particular event was interesting because Pep Guardiola, when we asked would he come to the event, he said yes. And at the time, Rory said, well, how do we do this? And I said, you get Pep's people to talk to me. And that's what we sorted out. And then I got a telephone call to say, Pep doesn't have people. So here's his telephone number. You speak to him. So I rang Pep Guardiola up, said, right, you're coming over to Belfast. We need you to arrive on this date. We'll put you in a hotel that night. You come to the golf tournament. He didn't ask me any questions about the event at all. Not one question. And a cool guy arrived with his wife and his young son.
Very cool guy.
We got to the theatre. You greeted us. We went into the green room, and he said it was the first time he asked me a question, and he asked me how many people would be in the auditorium, and because I was thrilled we had sold the thing out, I was like, "Oh, it's 4,000. It's great." and he completely lost himself. He started jabbering in Catalan.
Got anxiety.
Got real anxiety.
Yeah.
His son had to calm him down. I walked out. I probably left you with the mayhem. I just left the room. I didn't know what I could do.
I think I popped smoke and disappeared too. I was like, this is a family moment. I'm going to give him some room.
And when the first two questions he was asked, his answers were yes and no.
Yeah, I remember.
And I knew the script Jimmy Nesbitt was running off, and Jimmy completely flipped and didn't run off that script. He was able to save the moment, and he got Pep to relax, and it became the most terrific evening.
It was amazing. I mean, by that time, I was done with the green room. I had gone to, back a stage with James, and we kind of watched from the side, and you could tell at first, like, hey, this is going to be a 7-minute evening with Rory if this is the nature of answers to the questions that are conducted. And you could see him pivot in the moment and see how talented he really was to carry on a conversation with people that are uncomfortable in an uncomfortable environment.
Yeah.
And it went off well, splendidly. And we end our evening. We go to a bar. Everybody's carrying on. They're having a great time. As I mentioned earlier, I don't drink, so I'm often the designated driver of the group. And I have to jump into your highly expensive Range Rover at the time, that was your car, and drive on opposite side in these narrow Irish roads. And I don't know if you remember this, but it was like a horror movie, the fog that was rolling in.
It was misty.
And you were screwing around with me the whole time. You're messing with the visor. You guys are talking shit. It was a fun ride for you guys, I think, but my anxiety kicked in like Pep's at that point in time because I'm like, I just don't want to crash Barry's car. I want to get everybody home safe. I know I got like 3 hours of sleep before we all got to get up and carry on and crack on the next day.
Yeah, it was a sketchy journey back. I do remember the fog. Yeah, I do remember how slowly you were driving as well.
I was being careful.
You got us there safely. So
I did get us there safely.
That was the important thing.
Was that the night that Chris was at the pizza parlor?
Yeah, with our national soccer manager. Indeed, it was.
Yeah.
Because interesting.
He thought he was hanging out with a regular guy and going to go grab a slice of pizza. And by the time we left, I think there was a group of 100 people that were chanting his name at this pizza shop.
We have qualifiers on Friday and Monday for the World Cup, which is going to be hosted in the United States.
You going to come out for it?
If we qualify, I'm absolutely coming out for it. But Michael he's a legend, right? He's brought us through. We were a soccer nation that wasn't going anywhere before Michael O'Neill became our manager. So he's a big deal. And poor Chris was sent with him to get a pizza to sort of chaperone him. And Chris wasn't aware of just the big deal.
How big of a deal he was, yeah.
And I didn't want him in my car with his eating that pizza. So poor Chris had to go in the courtesy car with him. And
they made it back safe too.
Yeah, they passed us.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. Okay. We still got there safely. And we were able to close out the Irish Open. And in the last year when we were there, we had our, it wasn't your typical 5-star accommodations because of how remote the location was, but it was actually my favorite because it was so intimate. You had, and it was still a very nice hotel, but you had your own bar. You had your own, I would call it a pool table.
Yeah.
And everybody was so tightly knit, not only the guests, but the staff, the team. And it was kind of an emotional year because it had been communicated that I think Rory felt like his job was done. He rebirthed the Irish Open. He wanted to refocus on golf. He still needed to go out and get that green jacket. And, he was going to kind of wind down the charity.
Yeah.
So for us, it was, the last special event of this 4-year chapter. And my wife was there. My sister-in-law was there. I had some friends there. We had gained, I think, a personal friendship by that time, even though it started as a business relationship. And speeches were made, some tears were shown, and we ended it.
Yeah, well, we ended on such a high.
It was great.
It really was. It was wonderful, and yeah, friendships were forged. That.
I was working in the oil business at that time. I was coming back just because I wanted to help out in whatever capacity you guys needed. I would totally unpaid. It was just. I knew that I could having done it, for a few years, I knew that at the very least I can hand out tickets or something. I just wanted to be there with you guys because I knew it was winding down and I wanted to be there for those last couple of years.
No, it was lovely to have you all there. It was very special because we had been through so much together and we had learned so much, and it was a very special evening. Yeah,
and some special characters.
Yeah, there were a few dotted about from recollection.
Yep. So after you end your chapter with the Rory Foundation, I think you kind of made a name for yourself, even though it was new in the philanthropy world and the charitable world. What's next for you after that?
Yeah. So then I was sitting on the board of a charity, a sports charity called the Mary Peters Trust, and Mary's a huge name back home. And I became the chair of that charity then. So I steered that charity through COVID, remained chair for 5 years, and coinciding with the onset of COVID, which was difficult for us as a charity because, we raised our money through events and there was no events. So, there was a lot of hard decisions had to be made around that charity. It's interesting we talk about, profit in business. Charities quite often are so focused on the charitable endeavor they don't realize they need to be properly structured as a business to
To
sustain.
continue that charitable
Yeah,
endeavor.
so that was interesting. So I did that for 5 years, and then I kind of got bitten a bit by the philanthropic bug, I think, and I started to consult for other charities. So I spent 18 months consulting for a charity, a social justice charity back home in Belfast, which I loved doing. And then on the back of that, I ended up getting a similar gig in London and did that. And currently and these are part-time endeavors. Currently I'm now 8 months into what was a 6-month contract, looking after a charity in Enniskillen, which looks after kids with the developmental and physical needs, and it's an outdoor pursuit centre and it's a residential centre. It's kind of lost its way a little, so I'm in there to
Help
kind of
restructure and
help
get it back on the
restructure,
path.
get it back on path. So yeah, it's good. It's good.
That's awesome. So yeah, I think the Rory Foundation, the Irish Open, you amass a skill set. You've got some core competencies and best practices. It gets noticed in your community, and if you have other charities that are trying to reach the next level of their evolution or just get back on track, they're reaching out to a guy that's got a successful track record to do that.
Yeah,
It sounds like you like it.
I enjoy it. Yeah. Well, it's such a difference. I mean, because we properly made a difference, and I think it's important, when we all come to that day of reckoning, that we can say, did we make a difference for good? And was it a positive influence? And I think it has been, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
Yeah. We're here for a good time, not a long time. If you get 100 years, you're lucky.
Yeah, for
So it's
sure.
like, what do you do with the time that you're given? And if you're going to work, whether you're an electrician or a plumber, whether you're involved in sports or charity, do it to the best of your abilities.
Absolutely.
And don't do anything that you don't like doing. If you
Correct.
don't get out of bed excited to do what you're doing that day, find something else. Because
Yeah,
I guarantee there's something out there for you that you can get excited doing.
for sure. I completely would agree with that sentiment.
So that's a good segue into current day, current events. So you mentioned that, COVID kind of whacked the charity and that wasn't a good time. And, just to, pick up on the COVID topic, I personally think it was a horrible time for the world. I don't begrudge decision makers and governments for making mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, and you try to learn from those mistakes. It was particularly concerning when you had enough data, um, and they continue to double down on the same narrative. I think that was the silver lining that took place, at least from an American standpoint. Kids were held out of schools. And I think that was extremely detrimental to the youth for not only educational reasons, but social reasons. Not every home environment is the same. Some have a happy home environment, some do not have a happy home environment. And trapping him in that environment is probably the worst thing that you can do for the kid. Yet we doubled down on that. And in America, I think it was largely due to the teachers' unions. So when you see governments making the mistakes and doubling down on mistakes, I think people start to question things. Sometimes those questions go too far and you get into QAnon territory to where everything is a conspiracy, but sometimes they're legitimate questions. How do you feel in the UK and Ireland? How do you feel post COVID the government has handled the business environment? Because I think it crippled the business environment of America, and I still think we're slowly limping out of
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think we had a double whammy, right? We came out of Europe. The United Kingdom came out of Europe. They exited the European
Brexit.
Union. I don't think that was a sensible move. I think that all came down to very polarized opinions of identity, which you know allowed us to make decisions that actually economically were not beneficial to us. Um, So that wasn't good. COVID, I don't think I completely agree with you. We're going through the COVID inquiry at the moment in the UK. So um, the former Prime Minister was being questioned on the very subject of school closures just last week. So there'll be a lot of lessons to be learned from that. But I do think that post-COVID people have become more polarized and entrenched in their positions, and I don't see us. I don't feel we're very caring as a society now, and that upsets me.
Yeah, but I do have empathy for people's frustration. If you had that kid that was forced out of school, my cousin, for instance, his daughter was junior, senior year in high school when that was happening. That's a pivotal time in your youth. You're 16, 17 years old. You're figuring out what you're going to do next in life. At your time, you ended up working in the petroleum industry and having this amazing career. For many young kids, they go to university. They were completely robbed of their junior and senior year in high school. And his daughter told him she just wanted to get her GED. And he's like, the hell you are? Absolutely not. Like, we've invested this much time and effort, and I'm sorry that the world, gave you a bad hand, but we got to finish strong. And luckily she was able to actually get her degree, but it took people off course. And I think people were really frustrated, especially, when you see kids being held out of school, when you see some businesses being closed, but other businesses, especially large businesses, being propped up and doing extremely well, gaining market share, market cap expanding, while primarily small businesses are being destroyed, shutting down beaches when vitamin D and sunlight might have been the best thing possible for you to get with a little bit of exercise.
Crazy.
I was driving my bike with my daughters in California at the time, and if you didn't have a face mask on, outside, riding on the boardwalk on the beach, they were handing out tickets. I mean, that was the stuff that I think really rubbed people the wrong way, and they started to question government. And
I think that, and I also think, again, to your point earlier about the one bad employee, we had a lot of instances where, it's like, do as I say, not as I do. We had lots of examples of parties in Downing Street, right?
Yeah.
And we're not able to go to a funeral of a loved one.
or to
Right?
go see a loved one who's in a nursing home,
So
and they got to
that-
die alone as
yeah.
you wave on the other side of the glass.
Yeah. So all that was.
It's hard to get over things like
wretched,
that.
And folk making fortunes on personal protective gear who knew nothing about it.
Yeah, a lot of fraud. I think, and then when you see the money that went, the funny money that got pumped into the system during COVID, and money talks. All you got to do is track money, see where it goes, and you realize that, oh, this money went to this non-governmental organization that went to this nonprofit. And then by the time that the layers and the cuts are happening, you're like, by the time it ends up at the initiative that we all thought it was going to, there's very little meat left on that bone. Everybody and the consultants and the studies get paid along the way. Yeah, and I think that you start to take a negative approach on it. And for me, I think the big aha moment where you'll see more trust or more empathy from society is when people are held accountable. Because if you and I break the rules, I know, because I've broken some rules and I've made some bad decisions in my life, and I had some consequences related to that. And that was the only thing that took me off that course.
Yeah.
If I never had a consequence, why would I change my behavior? So when you see people in positions of power that don't have accountability, people get frustrated.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that there needs to be accountability. And I think I don't care what title you have. I don't care if you're the president of the United States or the prime minister. Like, if you broke the same rules that we all have to abide by, you should be held accountable and you should have consequences to that. And I think that that's where you get public trust back.
Yeah.
For better or worse, whether you agree or disagree with what that guy did, if they broke the rules, you
Yeah.
have to have
I would
consequences.
go with that theory.
All right. So, what are your thoughts on our 45th and 47th president of the United States? I know you've got some strong opinions on it, and I'm not here to debate or argue with anybody because I appreciate differing viewpoints, but you have a unique perspective. You're not an American. You're seeing it from across the pond. So I'm really interested. What do you think about, let's say immigration or foreign policy when it comes to Trump and how he's approaching things?
I don't know. I'm torn a bit. I'm torn a bit about your president. I think a lot of what he says is crazy. I think there are policies that I would agree with, but I think the delivery of those policies is mean. I don't know enough about the immigration situation to talk with any great authority about it. How it's reported back home is that guys in masks are lifting people off the streets and deporting them. They're disappearing. I know of an Irish woman who got deported. She was at some minor traffic incident. The next thing she's being treated like a criminal, and now she's back home in Ireland. And you got to get a handle on it, but does there have to be such meanness? I don't like that.
So let's unpack that. You said there are some policies you agree with, right? I'm a big sandwich, like in my approach, sandwich with positivity. And if you got some criticism, maybe throw that in between, right? And I think that the message is received. You might plant a seed that way. So what is a policy, just general policy, that you think is a good approach from Trump?
I think we absolutely, not just America. I think we absolutely have to get a grip on immigration. So and I may not agree with the delivery, but he's certainly succeeding with that policy. Certainly, let's get a grip on immigration. I think trying to get rid of inefficiencies within the government system is
like DOGE, what Elon Musk proposed and what Trump said yes to, and Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah, I think that's great, but I think the way they went about it isn't. So there are two policies I like.
Yeah,
I what would be closer to my heart would be his foreign affair policy. I don't think he has one. I think he just goes where he feels the wind's blowing at a particular time, and I do believe strongly that his treatment of the president of Ukraine in the White House was reprehensible initially, and he should not have met with Putin
in Alaska in the way that he did.
Absolutely should not have done that.
Understood. So if I may retort, because it sounds like you agree with some general policy approaches, the style in which it plays out, you very much disagree. And it sounds like it lacks, I don't know, it's not presidential from your perspective. Is that fair assessment of what your criticism? Just in those two topics.
I think him not being presidential doesn't trouble me so much, because I don't have a problem with, we have to behave this way because it's the way we have always behaved. I like that he's a disruptor. I like that, because I do think you end up in a governmental bubble where you think, oh my goodness, what's the president of the United States doing on the roof? Why not let him go onto the roof if he wants to go onto the roof? Yeah. So I don't have a problem with that at all.
Gotcha.
But I just he's very hard to define, and I sometimes really flop between I don't think he has any idea what he's doing at all, and he just wings it, to he's some sort of master strategist, and I can't figure it out.
All right. Well, can I help try to from my perspective?
For sure.
And I'll respectfully disagree. Again, I'm not here to throw shade. I genuinely am interested in people's opinions, because I understand my viewpoint, but I don't understand everybody else's viewpoint. And I imagine it's different. On the immigration topic, that one hits home to me personally, because I've seen it and I've tracked it, and I'm a big student of history. I'm a huge fan of Reagan. I think what Reagan did with amnesty in California led to the immigration crisis. It was essentially, if you enter in the country illegally, but you're here long enough, and we have this arbitrary position on whether or not you're a net gain on society, you'll just gain citizenship. Okay, that might have been a good decision at that time. I don't want to debate that decision, but what's the fallout of that, right? What incentive structure is created? And there's good and bad in the world, right? So the bad actors will launch onto things, just like the guys that were selling off-market fuel, right? It's like, if that avenue is open and I have no consequences to do it, and I'm a bad individual, I'm going to use that to my advantage. And I think there are some bad actors in government, not all of them, right? And they're not all Republican or Democrat. I'm not a big party line guy. I think that some of the bad actors started to use immigration, right, so that they could capture a populace that would vote for them. How do they do that? You offer incentive structures, right? That if you make it into the country illegally, you're going to get X, Y, and Z. And to continue to get X, Y, and Z, you better vote for our party, and our party has to stay in power. And I think the effect of that in California, due to Reagan's decisions over time, turned into a one-party state. And with a one-party state comes the fraud and the grift and everything that's taken place in California, and they've imploded that state. In my opinion, it's the most beautiful state in our union. It has the best weather, has huge natural resources. I mean, it's a coastal state. There's so much going for it. It's got deep ports, like the international trade that can take place. The energy resources, the mining resources are immense. And if it was properly run with proper leadership, and you did have consequences for the rule breakers, I think it would be a very different business environment. And I think the constituents and the people that lived in California would do far better. Now that explodes during Biden's administration with immigration, and I think largely for the same reasons, right? If you can bring a large group of people in and you can create perverse incentives, you have a capture on that populace and they're going to vote a certain way and it's going to keep you in power, which largely I think is the only thing that they're after, staying in power. And what happened was that you had an explosion of illicit fentanyl that came through the southern border. On top of the narco trafficking, you actually had human trafficking and child trafficking, and that hits home for me. I got daughters. And the horrors that I would do to people that wished harm on my family, I don't want to get into right now, but there's nothing I wouldn't do to protect my family. And fentanyl has killed hundreds and thousands of Americans. We know where the manufacturing precursors come from China, right? And we know the distribution route in which they enter America, largely through southern Mexico border, but even in the north of Mexico border. So this is happening. This is a reality, right? And, unlike other conflicts that we're involved in, it's hitting home for Americans because we're losing people. We both know somebody that we lost to fentanyl. And a close friend of mine, great guy, not a drug addict. He, went out with somebody and, thought he was having a fun night and he was taking a party drug, and it turned out that it was 100% fentanyl and he never woke up. Like that was a direct result of the immigration policy. And I have a heart for immigrants. I mean, we're a nation built on legal immigration. And I think the nation should assess where we are current day and say, where are our needs? Maybe it's farming, maybe it's IT, technology, whatever it is. We could say we have a shortage in the labor force for X, Y, and Z. And these countries do it particularly well. And we have interest from immigrants that want to come in. So maybe you establish a quota. And I think it should be two-part. Not only should you bring them in with H-1B visas and give them the opportunity at the American dream, but you should also build those core competencies internally, because you can't always rely on that outside influence. And I think if you do that, you've got a system of legal immigration to where people will come in, they'll add net value, and they'll assimilate to your culture. That's not what we got. We largely got over 100 different countries represented coming into our country, human trafficking, narco trafficking, hundreds of thousands of people dying of fentanyl overdoses, including my personal friend. And if you spoke out against it, you were racist and you didn't have any heart for immigrants, and we're all immigrants. And it's like, no, it's a perverse incentive that we're creating. Financially, we can't support it. It's unsustainable just on the financial side, but it's killing Americans. We're offering this drug trade, and no one was willing to change course. I mean, you could watch the videos at the southern border, and our leaders in government at the time, right? And I don't even want to get into their party. They're telling us that it's not happening. And I'm like, the bodies are racking up. There are hundreds of thousands of kids that are lost. And if you look into some of the stories of what Border Patrol people had to go through, I mean, there are police officers that literally commit suicide because it was so awful what they were witnessing down there. And it wasn't until Trump came in and shut it down with the military. And guess what? He added consequences to the narco terrorists. If you don't believe that, try floating a boat with drugs into the United States right now. It's not going to work out very well for you. And he's called a dictator or a fascist or a racist or a xenophobic for these things. And I don't think that those arguments hold a lot of water. And to your point, you mentioned that you got guys running around in masks. Well, I want to offer some context behind why that's happening, right? You have liberal groups that run around in masks and create terrorism in cities, and they hold people that live in densely populated urban areas basically captive because they take over parts of the city. They're allowed to wear masks, but our police officers aren't. Our police officers are being doxxed, which means that when you find out and you take a photo of your face, I can say this is Barry Funston. He lives in Belfast. He lives at this address. And all of a sudden, you start having terrorist activity. People throwing firebombs on your house. So we don't want our police officers getting killed, and they're out there in dangerous environments, and they're upholding the rule of law. They are going after specific people, even if it is at a Home Depot. They actually are going after specific people who have committed crimes and entered our country illegally, and they're saying, you need to go back. And before they get there to arrest them, they've created an incentive structure for people to self-deport. These are your non-terrorist, non-narco terrorists, non-human traffickers who did enter the border, and they're not bad actors, and they do want a part of the American dream. And we're saying that's unacceptable to come in illegally. If you self-deport, not only will we fund your ticket, but you get right back in line and you can have a crack at it the legal way. If you don't do that, we're going to come arrest you with masks on and guns drawn, and you're going to go back to where you came from, and there'll be a 20-year ban before you could actually re-enter the country. I think when you look at it from that perspective, I understand the masks. We've had Border Patrol agents killed. We've had feds killed. We have people being doxxed. And if I were in that job, I'd want a mask on too, to protect myself, to protect my wife, and to protect my family. I don't think it's racist. I don't think it's xenophobic. I don't think it's born of ill intent. I think it's trying to restabilize our sovereignty so that hundreds of thousands of Americans aren't getting killed. These young kids coming from other countries aren't being trafficked, and we restabilize our country. I think that's why he's doing it. And I think that the media largely spins it. And I think people's opinions are largely due to things they hear, things they see, or observations that they make. And I would just ask people that hold strong opinions, is it possible that you've received some biased information? Because if it is, then maybe there's new information that you can expose yourself to, and you might change, maybe not your entire opinion on the topic, but part of your opinion on the topic.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's how I feel about immigration. Jump into foreign policy, because you have strong opinions on our approach to Russia. And I think that there's some horrible things that America did strategically leading up to that conflict. And I think that we're very much in agreement on that. But from your perspective, because you are European and it affects you, a ground war in Europe affects you a lot more than it affects us. What do you think went so horribly wrong that has led to this conflict and is keeping this conflict from stopping? Because I don't think anybody wants to see Russians and Ukrainians dying at the rate that they're dying now.
Well, I think. I mean, you take it back to when the USSR broke up. I don't think that we were charitable enough then. I think we kind of rubbed the Russians' noses in it, and thought that was the end of the big commie bear. But and I think Putin, that he is an imperialist, and he absolutely bears a grudge.
Yeah.
And he saw an opportunity to take Crimea, and Obama let him. And, you know, we shouldn't forget that we talked the Ukrainians into giving up their nuclear arsenal and signed a document to say that they were going to be okay and we would keep an eye on them. And then
Big Brother would look after them.
And we didn't. We let the big bully move in. And we are appeasing him. That's what we are doing. And it's shameful. And it's not just the United States of America that are to blame for this. The Germans are taking Russian oil and are over-reliant on Russian energy. You know, France could have done more. Great Britain could have done more. We all could have done more. But we didn't do it. And at what point do you say no? Right? And I've had this conversation, you know, on this trip. And, you know, the answer that I've been given a couple of times is, but they've got nuclear weapons. You know, in the Second World War, we hardly had an aircraft. But Churchill didn't say, okay, Adolf, this is fine.
Yeah.
We stood up and were counted. And there has to be a moment in which you say no. And I just feel that flying to Alaska and putting on that big show was distasteful. It was distasteful for us because we would like to think that you would have our back. Now, I think your president is absolutely spot on about NATO. Good on him. I would applaud that. I don't think anyone else would have managed to do it. We certainly were not paying our fair share, and I completely agree with that. But, you know, you kind of hope that somebody's going to have your back, and we just don't feel that we don't feel as Europeans that that's the case with America.
Understood. I'm going to offer some criticism on America leading up to the conflict in Ukraine. I think that we participated in a coup around 2014 with the CIA and the neocons that were in power because they didn't like the fact that the leader, I don't want to say they were chummy to Russia, but they weren't in direct conflict with Russia. And we didn't like that. We wanted different leadership there. So I think that we propped up a coup. And I think that that was problematic for the region. I think some of the nonsense that was taking place with biolabs and some of the language about joining NATO was poking the bear.
Yeah.
And I think that we had off ramps leading up to it. They could have avoided the conflict, including Boris going out there. And I do believe the Americans told him, no, don't settle this. Keep the conflict going. Keep the money flowing, unaudited. I'm sure a lot of it went to keep Ukrainians alive and, fight on the front lines. But I think a lot of it went to other things. If you don't believe that, look at how rich Ukrainians are spending a lot of money right now in the world. And I think it was really poor leadership that we let Russia take Crimea, just rolled over and let it happen. And I think that's a piece of real estate that's not coming back to Ukraine. What happens with the rest of the Donbass region and everything else, I don't know. I do hope people stop dying. And I'm glad that Trump is trying to negotiate a settlement. I think it was risky to do the Alaska summit and lead to some bilateral or trilateral stop to the war. I'm glad that he did fly the B-2 bombers over his head while he was there because he kind of dunked on him and reminded him this is what we're capable of. But I agree with you in the sense that, this is different because it's nuclear war. Nuclear bombs are nothing more than a technological military advancement, right? There's been a long history of technological military advancement. The Iron Age was an example of that, when your enemies have weapons that are far superior to your weapons, meaning that the catastrophe that they can create is far bigger than what you can create. That's not new to warfare. That's existed for as long as humans were throwing rocks at each other. There was always a bigger, badder. And guess what? Then there's thermonuclear weapons. And who the hell knows what's going to happen with AI and drones and everything like that. There's always going to be a bigger and badder weapon. But to your point, you got to stand on principle, just like Churchill did. Yeah. I don't care that they have air superiority and that they're going to bomb us night after night. You're not going to break the British will. Yeah. And we're not going to appease a tyrant. We're going to fight. Yeah. And by him fighting, I think it stood the whole rest of the world up, and the Americans got involved and the Allied forces, and the rest is history. So I agree that if Russia doesn't change course, I think that Trump will be more in line with your opinion on the matter. I think he tried to have a positive relationship with the leader, and now Russia isn't taking the off ramps, and you see NATO stepping up with their defense funds, largely driven by Trump's style. If Trump was a nice guy like Chamberlain was back in the day, I don't think NATO increases to 5% of their defense funds.
Would completely agree with you.
I think it's the asshole Trump that everybody doesn't like is the effectiveness that made that happen. And it's the asshole Trump that when shit hits the fan is going to, I think, put Russia in their place. Hopefully Russia changes course because nobody wants to see all these people dying. You don't want to see ground war in Europe. But NATO is now stepping up. Trump is now initiating sanctions, and he's going to people that are buying from him like India and oil and saying you're going to stop that madness. So he's really putting the economic hurt on Russia, which creates a very contentious environment domestically for them and their leadership, right? That can get to a tipping point. So I do believe it's coming to an end, hopefully not to a nuclear end, and that Europe gets back on track. What happens with Ukraine after the fact? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Yeah. But it is a sovereign state, and there has to be a world based on rules, and you can't be just invading sovereign states.
There have to be consequences.
There have to be consequences.
Or else what does it do? Is it emboldens other sovereign states to go, wait a minute, Russia invaded Ukraine, and what did they get out of it? They got natural resource. They got a whole bunch of dead soldiers. That's the cost of war. But you can discard those young men because it's a generation of men that are dying. Right? Yeah. Like and it's young men. And when the young men are gone, they go up the age bracket. Now it's 30-year-olds. Now it's 40-year-olds. It's like you're killing off the men of your country. And if they're rewarded for that, I think it's going to embolden other countries. And to be honest with you, I think a symbolic moment that did embolden Russia was our disastrous pull out of Afghanistan. I think when you saw the strategic decisions and I think it was probably the worst black eye our country has ever faced. It was sad to watch people hanging on to airplanes and falling off and strategically giving up Kabul. It was as bad. I mean, it was bad. It was really, really bad. And I think that also put Russia in a position to say, we're going to go. They're saying all the wrong things. They're doing all the wrong things, and they are incapable, and they have no real leadership. They're devoid of leadership, and bad decisions are being made. Now's the time to go. So I think that largely America was to blame for this conflict, and hopefully with new leadership, we'll be able to play a role in stopping it. That's my opinion on the matter.
Will he need another 4 years to do it?
No, I don't think so. I think that the hope that I get long term for the country is guys like J.D. Vance. I really like J.D. Vance. If you don't like Trump's style, but you like his policies, you should love J.D. Vance. You really should. I mean, I think he's a kind-hearted person. He grew up in West Virginia. He saw the effects of reshoring internationally and globalization because you saw these rural communities in America just get crippled. Mining communities, industrial communities, manufacturing communities. We just offshored all of that so that we're going to move it and we're going to make China rich and they're going to love us for it. Didn't turn out that way. But you crippled the heartland of America. That's where he came from. And his family moves to Ohio. He joins the Marines. He ends up going to an Ivy League law school, does extremely well in the business world. And then he ends up being a senator. And Trump's son, Trump Jr., was probably the biggest advocate for him because he can debate on policy and principle, but he does so in a different way that Trump does. I think Trump is the man for the moment, just like Churchill was during World War II. And you may not like his style, but I think it's going to be effective. And I think it's going to be good, not only for America, but I do think it's going to be good for Europe and the Western world. People can disagree with that. I think history will tell. But I think you have a guy on deck with J.D. Vance that can go another 8 years and the team behind him, right? Because one leader is one thing. But when a leader can amass a team, in my opinion, like Trump's cabinet or what J.D. Vance would inherit from Trump's cabinet, that to me is an effective leader. When you have people surrounding you that are better at things than you are, and you're working in unison towards the same strategic policy goals, like that's an effective leader.
Yeah, for sure.
You might disagree with him, but he has a great team surrounding him. He's not the smartest guy in the room. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room, and I think that our leaders should feel the same way. I think you are the guy that ultimately the decision falls to, but you're getting great counsel from all different realms of the government, and I think that we're set up really well to continue that leadership for another 12 years. And I think if we do that, then we put America back on track. We put Western civilization back on track. And some people are going to be held accountable along the way. And that's how it has to be. You know, when you see guys like John Bolton getting indicted, I could send you countless examples of the average soldier or service member or special forces guy whose lives they've destroyed for just slightly stepping out of line. And you got guys like John Bolton and Brennan and Comey that were literally breaking the law, and they've just been given a pass because they're high up in the government. And if you want to get your country back on track, you got to hold people accountable that break the rules, whatever party they're in. Bolton's Republican. I don't know what Brennan and Comey are. I don't really care. I just care what they did was wrong.
Yeah.
And for people to get trust back in the system and for things to get back on track, you got to be held accountable for breaking the law and making bad decisions, because and when they make bad decisions, people die and our country gets worse.
Yeah.
And for 40 years, I think it's just been a grift on both parties, really. I don't want to sit here and say it's all Democrats, because what Bush did and what we did with Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, it was an atrocity. We lost a lot of young men, and substance abuse and suicide is a huge problem, with the veteran community. And I think it's because of the decisions that were made at the top. And I hope that our new leaders can correct those things and people can be held accountable, just as I would be held accountable for mistakes that I made. So that's my opinion on the matter.
Hard to argue against that.
All right. So to end it, how are things politically from a government standpoint in Northern Ireland and the UK? I know you guys have your own immigration challenges and leadership challenges. Do you think the future looks bright, or?
From a UK perspective, no, not at all. I mean, immigration is a huge issue. No one's seems to be getting a grip of it. Doesn't matter whether you're a Labour or a Conservative Prime Minister. I don't think the economy's doing well. I think we're not seeing any ideas coming from the government.
What are your opinion on their energy policies? Good, bad, indifferent?
I think bad. I think that the petroleum industry has always been the whipping boy, right? I'm not just saying it because I was in it. We had a refining capability in Belfast, which was shut down, goodness knows how many years ago. It didn't make any sense to shut it down, But this is bad for the environment. We've got to. Technology moves on. We can overcome these challenges. So, and we're having. There's a huge drive to the green economy in the UK, right? And like we really are irrelevant when it comes to the output of greenhouse gases. Yet we're all being pushed down the electric car route. We're all being taxed heavily on non-green energy. I mean, it's no. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with that at all.
And I think your opinion should matter. Like, you're somebody that's educated in the topic. We both agree clean water, clean air are important, but also affordable energy is important. Like, there's no bigger correlation to humans flourishing than affordable energy. I mean, that is what does it.
Yeah.
And when you make energy harder to extract, harder to produce, and more expensive, you do it to the detriment of your own country. And you guys have amazing resources in the UK and around the UK and the ocean there.
Yeah, for sure.
And not being able to access those, raw materials and resources, I think is done at the detriment of your own company. And you see it in other industrial applications too. Like, hey, we're not going to make steel anymore. Yeah. Too much carbon going out. So what are we going to do? Right? We make it more expensive here. We can't create our own steel, which I think is a national defense problem. If you can't create steel, especially Belfast with your guys' history of ship making, like, you guys should, in my opinion, be one of the world leaders in that. You're being forced to push that to India, who produces steel dirtier, and then you ship it across the ocean.
Crazy. It's crazy.
It's ridiculous. It's suicide. It's economic suicide. So, I mean, you have to be able to manage the dichotomy of, we want air and water to be clean, but we also want affordable energy. And I think you have to get to a practical policy standpoint where you can do all three, right? And that doesn't mean any one of those three is going to be perfect, but that's the balance that you have to create. But they've completely weighted it towards emissions and just offshoring energy and steel production. And I think that that's a really bad strategy, as indicated by Germany.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Germany's having to fire up old coal plants because they shut down nuclear, and now they're having to buy, petroleum products and gas from someone that they're kind of at war with.
Yeah.
That is not a good strategy to win.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully there are some leaders in your neck of the woods that also agree with this. I think it's a practical, common sense policy on energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not saying them, though.
All right. What do you think of the Reform Party?
I don't think. Again, there's some aspects of the Reform Party I would certainly. I would fall on the side of their views on certain things, but I don't really think they're a party of serious substance. I don't think Nigel Farage, he's a showman, that's all. I don't think that there's any real substance behind him. And he's a populist. He's playing on a narrative that a lot of people are attracted to, but you only have to. I mean, Brexit was the perfect example of that. He led the charge on Brexit, and you cannot, from an economic perspective, think that was a good idea, and nor has it stopped the immigration problem, right? It's got worse.
Yeah.
So I'm not a fan of his, and
I kind of agree with your consensus on that. I think Labour and Conservative Party.
Well, the Conservatives are busted flush now, totally. I mean,
bit of a joke. Yeah. I mean, my position, not yours. I'm not saying you're saying that, but that's my take on it. I like some of what I'm hearing from Reform, but I don't think they go far enough, and I don't think they're willing to fight the way Trump fought. And I'll end on this with Trump. You might disagree with his style, or you might say that he's mean-spirited, but if you look at what that man went through, right? The legal attacks. I mean, I think he was facing hundreds of years in prison on bullshit charges, proven bullshit charges. Don't take my word for it. Look into it. The real estate one in New York. I mean, that was crazy. They tried to kill him, tried to assassinate him a couple times. Family's being indicted. His home is raided. They rifled through his wife's underwear drawer. I'd be pretty pissed. And if I had someone from the media that was on board with all that, or if I had someone politically that was attacking me that was on board or even contributed to that, the kid gloves are going to be off with me too. Like if you go that hard at me, expect it coming back the other way. And I'll try to be presidential to people like yourself that can sit down and have a reasonable conversation. But for the guys that want to kill me, throw me in prison, go through my wife's underwear drawer, and embarrass me and lock up my kids, yeah, I'm going to come hard. And I don't disagree with him when he does that at all. I commend the man for standing on principle. And it may not be presidential, but I think it's necessary for this moment in history. My personal opinion. You may disagree. Totally fine.
You delivered it beautifully.
Well, Barry, thank you for doing this.
It's been a joy.
We got a lunch to catch, and then you got a plane to catch.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll be in your neck of the woods soon enough.
You're always welcome.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Appreciate it.